Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Today is the first of a little two-parter. For the first time in absolutely ages, I'm going to be able to go to an event. It's a one-day, 3-round tournament, and I'm taking the Empire of Man. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to have a bit of a chat through what the missions are going to be, what army I'm going to be taking with me, with a view to then reporting on the events in a week or so's time once the games have been fought and I've been able to process the games I've played. I've played a handful of games since the 1.5 errata came out. This will be my first major event, and at the time of recording, I think there's something like 19, 20 people have signed up for this. So there's a really good chance that I'm going to be able to play people I've never played before. And that's a really exciting thing. I tend to end up playing the same people, rinse, repeat locally when it comes to Old World. So yeah, an opportunity to test my mettle and my army against different players, experience different styles of gaming, and all of that good stuff. So first of all, let's have a look at the scenario. So game number one. Game number one is going to be upon the Field of Glory. The game length will be 6 turns, and we'll be using the baggage train and strategic locations secondary objectives. So what does this mean? Well, for me, it means my baggage train, that's going to be probably parked up at the back. I'm going to need to keep that defended. That's worth 100 points if I'm controlling it at the end of the game. It's worth 250 points to my opponent if they manage to destroy it before the end of the game. Obviously, likewise, they'll probably be doing something very similar. We're playing strategic locations 3 as well. So that means the middle ground is going to be hotly contested. Now, what you'll see from the map, you should be able to see on screen right now, is that hills are in the middle of the table. One thing the tournament organizer is very keen on is that we don't have hills in deployment zones. So this means no castling up around a hill, lumping all my artillery on it, and going crazy, blazing away to drive my opponent from the field. There's going to be blind spots behind the hill on the opposite side of the table, which I'm not going to be able to effectively touch. Obviously, that means I will likewise be in the same sort of position if my opponent's bringing a lot of artillery to the table. Now, I have done a test game, actually, which was Empire v Empire. We both took a lot of artillery, and first turn proved to be really, really important in that particular game. As we'll find out when we talk about my army list, I've got very few drops in the force that I'm taking, but I think deployment's going to be quite important, trying to keep things out of line of sight of anything that will absolutely batter them. And then really it's coming down to 2 options. Is do I push forward, try and take those strategic locations, try and get those passive points from just sitting there? Or do I sit back and try and obliterate my enemy with gunfire, pushing up later on the basis that, yeah, sure, you can get some points from those strategic locations, but you can't win the game if your army has been destroyed. So choices there depending on what I am playing into in that first game. Let's turn our attention to round 2, a chance encounter. Again, 6 turns using special feature and domination secondary objectives. This one's going to be pretty tricky. So again, looking at this deployment, there's some hills or some other kind of terrain which is going to be pretty close to that center point. Additionally, the special feature has to go there as well, and that is going to be an impassable piece of terrain, and it's also going to be line of sight blocking. This is going to make things very, very difficult, I think, for the forces of the Empire, because there's not going to be very good lines of shot here. I'm going to have to rely on cold steel. Now, importantly, the special feature, yes, if you are controlling it, it gives a buff to the unit that's deemed in control, but only scores points at the end of the game, in the same way as domination does. So you're only going to be scoring those points for controlling table quarters at the end of the game. I think there's a real piece here around an urge to move forward early to try and claim that middle ground. I'm not so sure about that. Well, again, it will depend a lot as to what I'm drawn into, but this feels like delaying that movement and trying to move in late. Having second turn might be beneficial on this one, which doesn't play into the hands of the army that I've selected, which is built around the idea of trying to go first. So I suppose we can but see. Finally, we've got round number 3, close quarter. This is fought in a mountain pass, so the short table edges are not going to be usable for things fleeing off the board, moving off the board, etc., unless they're ethereal or have the fly special rules. Here we'll be using the domination and strategic location 2 secondary objectives. Now, for me, looking at this particular map, the slightly constrained deployment zones mean things will be a little bit packed in. You can't go as wide as you normally would like to. Now, one thing that's also important here is I'm not sure whether we're going to be using 6x4 tables at time of recording, or whether we're going to be using the slightly smaller tables which Games Workshop have brought in for Warhammer 40,000, for example. If it is the smaller tables, this is going to get quite congested, I think, for quite a few armies on deployment, meaning it's going to be very difficult for enemy forces to deploy in such a way as my artillery's not going to be able to hit something. And obviously there will be artillery. Strategic locations 2, that means we're basically both going to be sat on a strategic location and scoring those points passively without really getting involved with anything. So it's going to be a bit more of a standard sort of battle, I think. There's no massive incentive to come forward unless that's what your army particularly wants to do. Domination, again, that only scores at the end of the game, so might be a case of trying to move into good positions to at least secure 2 of the quarters and maybe have a last minute drive for a third, if that's the way the game's panning out. But I think the main focus here is going to be on just winning the conflict rather than looking for those passive points. Overall, I think scenario 1 and 3 is probably okay. Scenario 2 definitely worries me, and I think certainly if I come into the wrong sort of opponent, round 2 could be the death knell of any ambitions I've got. That assumes, of course, I get through round 1 unscathed, which absolutely is not assured. I'm fully aware that Empire, yes, they've got their tricks, yes, they've got things they can do quite strongly, but there's a lot of stuff out there that can really ruin their day, and I fully also accept that I'm not the best player in the world. So whilst I do have my occasional success, I do tend to lose more games than I win. So I think that's probably it for looking at the rounds. Let's quickly talk through my army. And I'm taking something that is a little bit experimental. I've managed to get a couple of practice games in, mixed bag of results, but definitely some good learning points. So I'm going to be hoping to apply those in the games over the weekend. In my practice games of 1.5, I think I definitely fell hook, line, and sinker into the excitement around infantry. There's definitely a place for them. They're going to be the passive point scorers, but they need to be backed up by something able to move and to deliver a chunky blow. I also need a unit which can sit back for those baggage train strategic location 2 missions, but also where I've got the option of pushing that same unit forward and having it do something. So what have I gone for? Well, I've gone for a unit of 30 veteran state troops. They're going to be armed with halberds, light armor, shield, full command, and the Griffin banner. So the idea here is they're going to have a really good combat static res. They're going to be able to absorb charges, hopefully relying on the parry, light armor, and shield for a 4-up armor save. And then if they're still mixing it up, they can always switch to their halberds. A charge of opportunity, if that comes up, well, halberds are somewhat useful for that. They do get a little bit better if you use them on the charge, so it does give me some options there. They're going to be supported by a detachment of 11 archers, so that's a unit that I'm hoping will give me a little bit of versatility. Having that vanguard move also means that they can maneuver a little bit around the table once we're deployed. So for number 3, for example, where we're talking about that constrained deployment zone, I'll be able to move them and get out of the way if that's what I need to do. My final unit I'm picking from the core is a unit of the Knights of White Wolf. I'm not that experienced with Knights of White Wolf. I've always preferred Lance Arm troops, but I've decided to give this a go because it looks like they might offer me a different and slightly interesting angle. So there's going to be 8 of those with full command and the war banner, armed of course with cavalry hammers. Now hopefully you have watched the video I did at the beginning of the week when I talked about the Knights of the White Wolf and the support options. And have I got support options for these boys? So they're going to be backed up by a Grand Master. He's got a cavalry hammer, but he's using the twice blessed armor and also the laurels of victory. So this gives him not only his bunch of attacks, normally it gives him hammer hand, and any wound he causes counts as 2 points for combat resolution. So I'm hoping here that they can get into something and absolutely batter something worth battering early doors, cause some serious disruption and cause some significant problems. I'm further going to throw into the mix my level 4 Dark Magic Wizard, who is going to be looking for that Bloodlust spell in order to, well, give them Frenzy, give them Hatred. So really important rerolls and an extra attack to hopefully help them bring the pain. Panning out my character choices, there's 3 engineers, and of course where there's 3 engineers, there are a shed load of artillery. 3 great cannons and 2 Hellblaster volley guns. I was really in 2 minds about what to take when it came to artillery. Do I take 2 great cannon, a Hellblaster and a steam tank, for example, or am I going to drop the crutch, which is the steam tank? And I say a crutch, it is an excellent piece at holding stuff up, impact hits, decent stomp attacks, unbreakable, tough, lots of wounds, heavily armoured. I'm almost selling it to myself now. I'm feeling disappointed I've not taken it, but I've traded it for an increase in the volume of firepower that I've got. 2 Hellblaster volley guns should hopefully, in those round 1 and 3 games, give me some really good capacity to threaten the centre. Now, my opponent, certainly looking at that round 3, may well have an incentive with the amount of artillery I've got not to push forward at all. Again, depends what we're facing into, because the volley gun's only having a 24-inch range. Yes, you can finagle it with their free twizzle before they shoot to get an extra couple of inches of range, but I'm not taking Nuln, so I'm not going to have the Vanguard rule to push them up and just make them unavoidable. Overall, it could be interesting. It might not be interesting. It might backfire absolutely horribly. It's very much geared around going first. So if I come into Cathay, for example, or other Empire, I really want to be getting rid of their war machines early doors. For Cathay, their artillery firing twice could completely wreck my ability to deal with any balloons they've got. And I'm very aware, having had one of my first test games was actually against Cathay, where a well-placed bomb from one of the flying lanterns pretty much wiped out an entire unit of state troops by itself. So I'm really worried about opposition artillery being able to speak first and take away my opportunity to deal with their guns. That's probably enough waffle for now. Wish me luck over the weekend, and I'll let you know how I get on. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.